So 10 years ago on February 13th, my boyfriend went missing. His body was found washed up on the edge of the riverbank the next day. Matt and I had been dating for 3 years, and it would have been 3 years on Valentine's Day. He was sweet and mature, unlike a lot of the boys at our school. I remember that first Valentine's Day, he wrote me a poem in a handmade card, and left it with a single rose on my desk. I know this sounds silly looking back, considering we were so young, but we made big plans for our future. I couldn't see any other reality than us being together. He and his family lived just around the corner from mine, and we often sneaked out to our local park. The nights we spent planning every detail of our future under the stars were magical. My world began to fall apart when I got home from school one night. I had been worrying all day that I hadn't heard from Matt, and thought it was unusual that he hadn't at least texted me. As I walked through my front door, there was a man and woman sitting in our living room. My parents were with them, and I could see in my mother's teary eyes that something bad had happened. The two detectives explained how Matt was missing, then how they found his lifeless body in the frozen river the next day. My Valentine's Day was spent alone, drowning in my own tears. That was until there was a knock on the door around 8 p.m. that day. My dad opened the door to find a single rose in front of the steps. When my father handed me the freshly cut rose and a small note, my heart dropped as I knew it was from Matt. Part of me even refused to believe he was gone, but the subsequent funeral and memorials made me face reality. I still had a shred of hope that he was alive. I didn't go to school for a few weeks after that. I just couldn't face it, the questions, the staring, it was all too much. A year had nearly passed, and even though I had started smiling and going out with friends again, the scars still ran deep. There was a small anniversary memorial for family and close friends, and Matt's family was equally supportive of me as I was of them. After I got home from the memorial, I found a single rose delicately placed on our doormat. My stomach dropped as I noticed the same handwritten note was attached. My parents were slightly concerned, but I didn't feel any malice or creepiness. I knew it was from him. I placed the rose in a small vase of water and put it in the center of my windowsill. I kept this tradition, and the single rose was always at my door each Valentine's Day. I know that this sounds like a sick, twisted joke from someone taking advantage of the tragedy, but in my mind, it was a small sign from Matt. At that moment, I felt his love once again. 5 years later, I met my soon-to-be husband, Luke. He was aware of my past struggles with relationships, but he was patient and understanding. I knew he was the one for me, and we got married 2 years ago. We moved into our first house that summer, after living in a rental apartment. However, the annual rose and note continued to follow me, causing tension between Luke and me. He believed that someone was playing a cruel joke on me, but I had a different view. On last Valentine's Day, Luke threw the rose and note away, as he said he didn't like the fact that some creep was sending me these kinds of things. This led to a heated argument that resulted in me crying while he slept on the couch. The next day, I found a crushed rose. It had a broken heart hand drawn on the attached note in my mailbox. I held it in my shaking hand as I went inside. I broke down as I placed the remains of our flower and heartbreaking note in my bedside table. In the following months, strange things began to occur in our house. The TV would turn on in the middle of the night, cupboards would open themselves while we were at work, and footsteps were heard at night outside on the decking. Luke decided he would install cameras outside, but they showed nothing. That was until last week. The backyard camera captured a shadowy dark figure moving across the outside wall. Luke told me that the security app alerted him at 2:25 a.m. He then got out of bed and went to check if anyone had broken in. As he walked into the kitchen, suddenly the lights began to buzz and flicker above him. He then felt a sharp pain as something scratched down his bare back. I came running downstairs to check on him, after I heard him scream. I saw 5 deep red scratches run down his back. After I had cleaned his wounds and we had calmed down a bit, we went back to bed. I watched the footage back the next morning and it indeed captured the looming shadowy figure outside. That's when I noticed it was holding a flower. The grief and guilt I felt in that moment was incomprehensible. How Matt was still trying to show his love for me from beyond the grave, and I had moved on and shut him out. I now feel terrified about what may happen to me or Luke this upcoming Valentine's Day. So this incident happened last year on Valentine's Day. I'm a female who lives by myself in a small house about 10 minutes outside of a major city. I've lived in this house for about 3 years now, after moving from an apartment in another city. I had been single for a while, and I hadn't really been dating. At the time, I was mainly just focusing on work, which was really busy at that time of the year. Then one morning, it happened to be Valentine's Day, and I got up at about 6 a.m. like I usually did. When I stepped out of my front door, I noticed that there was a letter on my front step, with a rose on top of it. I picked it up and saw that it had my name on it, but no return address. It was strange because at this early in the morning, I knew that somebody had to physically bring the letter and rose to my front step, and not just mail it. I took them both inside, and was really curious to find out who this was from. When I opened up the letter, my mood went from happy to creeped out. The letter was typed out and started out by complimenting me on my looks, and also saying I was really nice. Then it went on to describe some of my daily activities, and eventually, whoever wrote it, said that we were meant to be together. However, they never left their name and there was no indication at all of who it was from. I took a photo of it and sent it to a group chat that I had with several of my friends, asking if one of them did it as a joke. I really didn't think they would do something like that, and sure enough, they all denied it, but they did think it was pretty funny. I thought about all the people that it could have been, but I didn't really have any good ideas as to who it was. I decided to just move on and forget all about it. That night when I returned home from work, I once again saw something on my front step. It was a heart-shaped piece of paper, and it said on it, "Why don't you spend Valentine's Day with me?" I took it and went inside and called my best friend to tell her about it. We talked for a while and it made me feel better. After talking with her, I was in my living room, and suddenly, I heard a knock coming from my front door. It was nighttime by now, so it immediately got me suspicious. I went over to the front door, but nobody was there. I saw through corner of my eye, a man walking down the sidewalk in the other direction. Of course, I only saw him for a second, so I couldn't really give a description of him at all. I opened the door and there were no new letters or anything like that on the front step. I was now pretty concerned about whoever this was, but I didn't really know if it was grounds to call the police or anything like that. I hadn't been threatened or anything, so it seemed like it could have all just been a joke, but still, I couldn't help but feel nervous about who it had been. I called my best friend back and she offered to come over and stay the night with me. She didn't live too far away, and she was there within 15 minutes. There was no more activity the rest of the night, and the next day everything seemed fine. I went back to work like usual. When I got home, I was happy to see that there were no letters or anything like that. I figured whatever had happened, it was just some Valentine's Day prank. I still wondered who it was though, but I was no longer really that concerned. But about 2 days later, I got home from work. I once again saw a letter at my front doorstep. I got a bad feeling when I saw it. When I got inside, I opened up the letter inside the envelope. There was another handwritten note. It said, "I've been watching you. I hope you enjoyed my Valentine's Day card the other day. I also knocked on your door several times, and tomorrow, when you get back from work, I will be back." I couldn't believe it when I read that, and I suddenly felt really freaked out. I ran straight from my front door and out to my car. When I was safely in my car, I drove to the nearest police station and told them everything. They ended up investigating and having an officer stay in my house for a couple of days. I don't think they ever found out who was behind it all, but I never had anything like that happen again. So my girlfriend and I are college students at a small school in Kentucky. Due to the way that the college works, it's hard for a lot of students to afford to keep up with having their cars on campus. This means that you typically have to walk everywhere, unless you have a bike. I was amongst the unlucky this semester. The evening had rolled around, and we were thinking of semi-romantic things we could do together, since it was Valentine's Day. We arrived upon ordering food from Uber Eats. Most of the restaurants were closed, but Taco Bell was still open, so naturally we ordered from there. But we were unknown that there were no active drivers at that time, probably due to the road conditions. At the time, it was freezing and quite snowy. The app defaulted to the setting where you can go walk and pick it up. There wasn't an option to cancel it, so I decided I would walk the 1.5 miles to go pick up the food. I know most people at this point wouldn't be keen on walking in the snowy, freezy conditions at that time of night, but I was a broke college student who just spent his last few dollars on food. With a hug and a kiss from my girlfriend, I started off on my long journey to get the food. Walking through campus at night isn't a problem for me, since I'm a 5'9" male. But when you make it through the campus and into the residential areas of town, that's when things tend to get sketchy. I had made it through campus, and was about a quarter of the way to my destination, when in the distance, I saw another man walking down the streets. Initially, two things put me at unease, the first one being that he was wearing one of those long trench coat things that you typically associate with someone doing something sketchy, and the other being the conditions out. I mean, logically no one should be walking around in these conditions, as they were literally cold enough to freeze the sweat in your hair. I pushed these thoughts back, assuming he was either in a similar situation to me, or maybe he just really enjoyed the weather. I did switch sides of the street though, as I'm socially awkward, and hate talking to random people I don't really know. We both walked right past each other. It seemingly went off without a hitch, neither of us acknowledged the other, and just kept walking along. Being the weary person I was, I decided to look over my shoulder often in these kinds of situations. He was walking the same direction he had been. I kept walking, throwing the occasional glance over my shoulder for safety. After about 2 minutes, the mystery man was now walking in my direction, and a bit faster than I was walking. This creeped me out, and I started to walk a bit faster as well. I couldn't run because of the road conditions, they were too icy at that moment. I noticed the man begin to pick up speed too, until we were side by side on opposite sides of the street. When he caught up to me, he started yelling at me and I saw something fall from the sleeve of his jacket. It fell to the ground, making a large clatter like a piece of metal bar or a large metal knife. At that moment, I grasped the danger of the situation, and my fight or flight instincts kicked in ready to defend myself. I pulled out my pocket knife as I noticed him starting to make his way across the street. I told him not to mess with me and alerted him that I had a knife. The man stopped dead in his tracks and said, "I thought you were someone else, who just attacked me." I played it off cool and said, "It seems you've got the wrong person, my dude." He retreated to his side of the street, and continued in the other direction. I continued on my trek to Taco Bell. But after this experience, I was more cautious, because of the potential of having two creepy men out on the streets. As I was looking over my shoulder, I noticed a man from before on the same path that I was. I just walked as fast as I could to the Taco Bell while throwing glances over my shoulder, except at some point, the man just mysteriously vanished. I made it back to the college campus without any more events, but needless to say, I have my hand on my pocket knife at all times to this day. I have no clue what his true intentions were, but I know they certainly weren't any good.